Thinking of trading your big home for some Florida sunshine? Before taking the plunge, watch this video where I'll give you 9 things you need to consider before downsizing and moving to the Sunshine State. Let's get into it. So, the first thing we want to talk about is decluttering and kind of getting an inventory of what you own. The important thing about this is you're going to be moving from a large home to a small home. Sometimes, as in the case of one of my customers, Mr. L and his wife, they had two different homes. She lived in South Florida, he lived in Central Florida, and they wanted to combine everything together. They had tons of furniture. They had, two bedroom sets. They had two master bedroom sets. They had two couches, two pretty much of everything. And they had to figure out what they needed to leave behind, what they had to put in storage. It was a lot. It was a lot, even though they were moving into a smaller home that was still a substantial home. It wasn't a tiny home by any stretch. They still had a lot of stuff. Her home originally was over 4,000 square feet. His home was probably around 2,000. And to combine the two together into the new home, they ended up really having to figure out what they wanted to leave behind, what they wanted to get rid of. There was just a lot that went into it. So you want to make sure that you take a sheet of paper. Sometimes you can find some things online if you Google it. You can find some pre-done forms or even spreadsheets where you can put everything in that you own and then start to determine, well, I want to keep this, I don't want to keep that, this is important, that's not important. Because think about it, as you go from the life you're living now to the life you're going to have in a smaller situation, maybe in an unfamiliar city, you don't want to have a lot of burden. You don't want to have a lot of things holding you down. The other thing you want to look at is how much space do you really need? If you're coming from a 3,000 square foot house, 2,000 seems pretty small, but when you get into a 2,000 square foot house, is that really going to be small enough that you're not wearing yourself out trying to maintain it? I've had customers that wanted to downsize, but they wanted to downsize on a 5-acre piece of property. And I'm like, who's going to mow it for you? Are you going to get out there and spend hours mowing in your 70s? Do you really want to? Is that really where you want to go when you're downsizing? So you want to think about what your lifestyle is going to be like when you downsize. You want to think about, do you really need that much space? Is a 1,100, 1,200 square foot home going to be good for you? Is an 850, 900 square foot villa going to be good for you? Make those decisions ahead of time. Now, when it comes to emotional preparedness, this was something that Miss B, and I didn't catch this because I was new to real estate at the time. This is a number of years ago. So I've been doing this for about 11 years. This was probably my first or second year in the business. I went to list her home. We had a great conversation. We really talked about all the things that needed to be done, and she seemed to be pretty much on board. And so I just took that as gospel, basically. I took it as, yeah, she's doing pretty good. Well, make a long story short, we get in the day before and I call her up and she says, hey, I've only got a couple more boxes. I want to put them in storage. My son was probably 9 years old, 8 years old, maybe a little bit less than that. And my daughter was probably about 3 years younger than him. So 7, somewhere's in there. But anyways, I said, look, my son and I will come over, we'll pick up the boxes, we'll put them in storage for you, no big deal. My wife, she made the call that the whole family should go, and she was dead on with that. I mean, she was just spot on. Well, we get there, and nothing was done. Everything was still in the closets. The only thing that had been taken out where the movers were coming at the furniture, but all of her belongings were there. Up in the attic crawl space, in the closets, I mean, everything was there. You haven't met my wife. You will eventually. My wife, Cindy, is the sweetest person in the world. That day, she became General Cindy. She basically took Miss B, sat her down in a chair in the middle of the living room and said, all right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to have 3 piles. One for keep, one for giveaway, one for throwaway. We're going to bring you everything. You're going to show us which pile you put it in, and then we're going to move on from there. And from that point on, we just started feeding her stuff and telling her, or her telling us which pile to put it in. I ended up calling in the cavalry. I called in some of her friends. I called in some people that I knew, including somebody to take trash out, the whole deal. And we got it done in a day, but it was the most arduous process. And we don't want you to go through that. I don't want you to go through that. You want to make sure that you're emotionally ready to do this. She was overwhelmed and she never reached out to tell me that she was overwhelmed. She just kept saying, everything's fine, everything's fine. So think about your emotional state before you start making a plan. You want to make sure that you have things lined up ahead of time. So whether it's movers and knowing which movers to use, knowing which ones are reputable and have history of taking good care of their customers. You want to make sure you have all of that ahead of time. Now, when it comes to things like, handymen, electricians, plumbers, anything that you might need after the fact in case something happens, I got you covered. That's not a big deal. The next thing that we're going to talk about is legal considerations. And this is something that's recently happened that really, it was kind of a shame. I had a customer, Mr. A, and Mr. A called me and said, hey, look, my grandma passed away. When she had the house, she let my uncle do a bunch of stuff, and we don't know what he did, but it looks like, we have now a reverse mortgage. And on top of that, a electric solar system. Now, here's the thing. When you have a reverse mortgage and you decide that you want to sell the house instead of letting it fall to the reverse mortgage company, anything else that's been done to the house that is a lien, you're going to have to work out with them. And those legalities need to be dealt with ahead of time. So they had $30,000 or $40,000 worth of basically electric solar system that the reverse mortgage had no idea about. And so that changes that whole structure of the contract that they signed with that company for the reverse mortgage. There was no money to pay for it. And so they're going to be held accountable for that. And that means that lawyers need to get involved and there needs to be a lot of things that need to be worked out. So you want to make sure that you have all of those legal things worked out ahead of time. If you're coming from a reverse mortgage, talk to your reverse mortgage company. Make sure that they know that you've decided to sell your home rather than let it go to them, at the end of life, so to speak. You need to work those things before you make that decision to make a move. The next thing you've got to really work on is, your healthcare options. Where you're moving to, where you're going to be downsizing to, do you have hospitals, VA hospitals, clinics? Is the setup for you in terms of your healthcare and healthcare providers? Are they there? Are they what you need them to be? And are they good? That's the big thing. If they're not good, it doesn't really matter. Because if you get into an area with a crappy hospital, and crappy clinics and crappy doctors, then you're kind of screwed. You may love the area, you may love the house, but how is that going to really help you? So make sure you've done your research. Make sure you've researched the hospitals, the clinics, know where the VA centers are, know where you're going to be doing healthcare business so that when you move, it's not going to be a struggle if something happens or if you need to go to the doctor or if you need to find, whoever's on your PPO or whatever the case may be. The next thing is the community and, your social environment. So some people, myself included, don't really want to be in a 55 plus community. That's not my bag. It's just not what I like. And so if you are looking for a 55 plus community, you need to know what they're all about. You need to know whether or not they have the kind of, community events that you're looking for, the kind of community center or things to do that you want. If you're a pickleballer, then you want to make sure that there's something either in the community or something close by. If you're, into bingo or, whatever the case may be, shuffleboard, I don't know, whatever it is, make sure that that social environment is the kind of social environment you want to be a part of. Do your research, get online, look at reviews, make sure that that community is going to really propel you forward as you downsize and look forward to relaxing and being able to do the things you've always wanted to do, moving here into the Sunshine State. Okay, now, want to know if now's the best time to downsize? Download my free guide, 7 Signs It's Time to Downsize in 2025. I'll put the link in the comments below. All right, next we need to plan for future needs. Mr. N decided to sell his home and move up into the Carolinas, which was a fantastic idea. The problem was, at his age, he only had a few years of living that life that he dreamt about before he found that him and his wife started to physically not be able to keep up with everything. And the last I spoke to him, they were looking at getting into an assisted living facility. So, before you make that move, you need to really assess your own physical and emotional needs for the future. Is downsizing and moving into a nice home, a smaller home, going to be something that you're going to be able to sustain for a number of years? Or is it going to be something that very quickly you'll have to give up? Those things I can't answer for you. And so you really want to make sure that you know exactly what you are dealing with in a realistic way. Because if you're looking into the future and you say, well, I only have a few more years, I'm starting to get wore out, Now, if you're in your 50s, if you're in your early 60s, you may have 20 years, you may have 25 years, you may have longer. I hope you have longer. But, as you get older, those things have to be considered. And so make sure you know exactly what you're dealing with. And then the next thing is, do you have a strong enough reason why? I have some customers that their reason why is, they live up north, everybody has moved out of the state, they have no family or friends, and they want to be close to friends, they want to be close to family, whether it's the grandkids or, whatever the case may be. That's a strong reason why. Other people have a strong reason because physically they can't take care of that house anymore. It's just too big and they can't afford to have somebody come in and clean and deal with things for them all the time. And that actually is another strong reason. When you get to a certain point and you're on Social Security, let's just say, even if you have a pension, even if you have money coming in from 401k or, whatever investments, sometimes people forget that even after they retire, the house doesn't retire. The house doesn't just stop and it doesn't need things after you retire. So putting in a new roof can cost $15,000-$20,000. Maintaining a house can cost money every month. It can cost money every year. Taking care of things that break. All of those things need to be considered because you are looking at selling a home, but if you've not maintained that home, the amount of money you think you're going to get from that home is going to be less. And it's going to be way less depending on the condition of the home when you get ready to sell it. So if you're being honest with yourself and you look at your home and you go, it's not really in great shape. It's not up to date. The roof needs to be replaced. There's some issues with the electrical. I haven't really maintained it. Maybe you're not going to get as much as you need to be able to turn around and get into another home the way you think. So all of this is really about being realistic. If you're being realistic and if you have a good idea of what it is you're looking at, then you can determine whether this is going to be a good time for you or not. Remember to download my free guide, 7 Signs It's Time to Downsize in 2025. I'll put a link in the comments below. If you need help coming up with a plan, or if you have questions about Central Florida or the housing market here, give me a call. My number is 863-220-8260. Or if you'd like, you can go to talkwithvince.com and let's get connected there. Anyways, hope you guys like this video. Remember to like the video, subscribe, share, and click that little bell icon so you know when the next video comes out. Hope to see you guys again, and talk to you soon.